Hi, HR Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today, we've got a special guest on the show. We're joined by Dr. Stefanie Johnson, who's a professor, a coach who translates research into action so that organizations can get the best ROI on their DE&I initiatives. She's also the author of the national bestseller, Inclusify. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Chris. I'm such a big fan of your show and your work, and I learn so much every time I listen to an episode.
Oh, I'll pay you later. I appreciate that. Firstly, how are you? It's been a while. How are things? How's the family?
Well, for me, it's a really good time. My family's on sabbatical this year in Curacao, which is an island in the Caribbean. And so I will admit that sabbatical has been really rejuvenating and just like relaxing. I don't think I would be this relaxed and chill if I didn't go to the beach every day. But
you're making everyone jealous right now. Everyone listening is like, oh, you just made us.
Hey, stop listening. And I didn't show up in my yoga on the beach outfit this morning, but that's usually my daily attire, which is like, you can't get anything better in life than yoga on the beach.
Yeah. I can tell how relaxed you are right now that your clock behind you doesn't even have numbers on it. You're like,
exactly.
You're like, who cares about time?
What time it is? It's yoga on the beach time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, who needs numbers on a clock? I'm going to relax today and do whatever I want. Yes. Love it. Super jealous. For everyone listening, tell everyone a little bit more about your background and your journey to where we are today.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a professor at the University of Colorado, Lead School of Business. And really my area of research is leadership. And so I was trained in industrial organizational psychology, where we focus a lot on human resource issues and ways to improve workplace selection, hiring, promotion. And I love all those things, but for me, it's always been about the leadership that makes that happen. And so I think the most important topic when it comes to leadership today is really about how leaders can engage a more diverse and inclusive workplace. And so that's what my research focuses on. It's always focused on that, even when I didn't want to study diversity and inclusion, which I didn't want to study that. I don't know how you study leadership without really looking at the DEI implications.
Mm-hmm. When did you get to the point where you realized that how important that work was? Obviously, we kind of all know how important it is. And then deciding, you know what, I'm going to write a book. Was there a particular moment?
Truth, just between you and me, I always wanted to write a book because I love, pop leadership books or like nonfiction generally, and I love business books. So even when I didn't know what I wanted to write a book about, I thought, I can consume a book a day on of nonfiction. And fiction, it takes me a lot longer, but I'll say honestly, that I always thought this was an important topic. And even I did research as a college student, if you can believe it. And I studied gender and leadership. And then when I went to graduate school to do my PhD, I tried to not study gender because I'm in a really male dominated field, and I'm a woman. I'm Mexican-American, which is an underrepresented minority in the States. And so I wanted to study the more mainstream to kind of fit in. And so people wouldn't think I was soft or not serious, right? All those negative stereotypes, which I do think exist.
Yeah.
And so I tried to veer away from that, but I just couldn't. In my research, studying leaders and promotions and, what creates successful leaders, this topic would just come up again and again. And so I guess to answer the latter part of your question of when did I decide to really double down on it, I'll say post tenure, when I could no longer be fired. I'm like, ha. So now
that's such an honest answer.
Yes.
I love that.
No one can stop me on my reign of terror of trying to really improve DEI outcomes for organizations.
Yeah. There are a lot of books out there in the space now and more popping up. Where do you see that your book, what's different about your book? And who did you write it for?
Yeah, so it's really for, leaders, I suppose, but I consider leaders anyone who's driving culture in an organization. So most people are leaders. Mostly I interviewed Fortune 500 CEOs. And so that's that's like most of the content, but that's not a great audience because there's really only 500 of them in the US anyway. So we're hopefully anyone can learn from their wisdom of top leaders. And what makes it different? I think it's probably one of the first books on the topic of inclusion. And it's really data driven. It's not, even though I interview leaders, I try to marry their great insights with what their primary research says, because I'm a researcher and a professor. So I think that's different. And then people tell me this, okay, it's not just tooting my own horn, but I think it's also really easy to read. Like
that helps.
Narrative stories and so it's hopefully like for a professor, it's not written like a professor style.
Yeah. I've got a question, which when I was looking at your work, the word inclusifier comes up a lot. What is an inclusifier?
Yeah, an inclusifier is the type of leader who really exemplifies the leadership values of focusing on the uniqueness of people and creating an environment where everyone can belong. And I would say most of the leaders who really did this well did so in their work life, but it would become pervasive and they would start doing it in their personal life too. And so they're living and leading in a way that really centers diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging in everything they do.
Yeah, love that. So you coined that. You've made just like, I'm just going to make up a word now.
I made it up, yeah.
As well. I love it though. Now you own that. You own Inclusifier. It's really cool.
I hope so. Well, and I don't think that include is really a strong enough word. Like people think, oh, you're included. I included you. You're here. But people are there and they don't feel that feeling of inclusion. And so I think that I was trying to get to the point of it's not just letting people in the room. It's actually creating an environment where people feel like they're safe, like their opinions are valued. Like you want to learn from them because you know that it's going to make you better as a leader. And so that's inclusifying.
Yeah, I love it. So what for audience then, what are some of the, as you described, sort of unexpected ways that leaders undermine their teams?
Yeah, so that was the big surprise for me in doing the research for this book, is that a lot of leaders, well, first, almost all leaders really want it to be inclusive. Like I've studied diversity for a long time, and there's definitely people who are like, yeah, it's not my thing. I don't believe in diversity. I don't care. But for inclusion, like I didn't really meet any leaders who were like, no, I don't want to be inclusive. I don't want other people's opinions. I don't want an engaged workforce. It's like ridiculous, right? Like people want to be inclusive. The surprise is that a lot of people think they are really inclusive and they're not. Like they say all the right things. And then I interview their teams and their teams are like, no, this, my boss says that she wants our opinions, but if the opinion's wrong, we're in big trouble. And so that's not very inclusive. And some of the unexpected ways that really manifested is some leaders who they said, we really want to create an environment where everyone can belong. And so I call these leaders culture crusaders, but, we want everyone to fit in. We want to hire people who I want to have a beer with, like that kind of culture. And they thought they were doing this really well and they really, it worked for some people, but the reality is that there's always people who don't feel like they're part of the culture, like they belong. And there's a lot of people who are faking it to fit in.
Just to go along with it, right?
Exactly. I mean, you
literally said the example that was my example, by the way, in my head. So I never used to drink. But my leadership team would only socialize in that way. So go out for drinks, go and party and do this. And I was like, I don't drink. So I'm just sitting there and I never used to go. So, I used to be, oh, Chris, you never really make an effort to get involved with the team. I'm like, because all you do is drink alcohol and I'm not going to go out until 1-2 a.m. at night getting drunk. And that's just not who I am. So every single activity they did involved going out and getting drunk. Or literally there was one leadership retreat to Vegas and I was like, I don't want to go and gamble and do drugs and alcohol. It's like not who I am. And I actually was made to feel that I didn't care. Oh, you're not making an effort with the leadership team, Chris. You're not making, I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned going out for drinks because I was like, I remember that. Yeah.
There's a study that showed people who drink actually out earn others in the workplace, which you would,
No, it's
if
true.
you had to guess.
It's true, because even I found out one of these managers who's same role as me, maybe a few years later, was getting paid almost double what I was. And she was, you know, best friends with the CEO, best friends with the founders, went out for the drinks, do those things. And I was like, oh, okay. So this is, and people kind of realize that in that business, by the way, that the more you cozied up to those leaders, the more money they made. So you are 100% right. Like I personally, even though, by the way, I was outperforming that individual in terms of sales at the time, probably 4 or 5x, I was getting paid less because I didn't go for those drinks. It's crazy.
And, you know, there's some companies today who actually stopped allowing alcohol at corporate events. They've like I think Salesforce did this just because of that culture. And it's, you know, it's not terribly inclusive, right? Like certain religions don't drink. You might have health reasons for not drinking. You could just not like to drink, but when it's so central, and I went on it was a talk, but these are something we do in academia. It's like a fake job interview. Mm-hmm. And so they asked me to come out and deliver a presentation, and I didn't drink. I may not have drank anyway, but in this case I didn't drink because I was pregnant, and I didn't know this, or they didn't know this. I probably knew, but and years later I heard from someone at an event, they offered me a drink, and I took it, and they said, oh wait, I thought you don't drink. Because you're Mormon. And I was like, I didn't know I was Mormon. That's like, I don't know why that's like, you know, cringy, why they're embarrassed to tell me.
That's even more awkward. Oh my God. So yeah.
So I'm like, why do you think I'm Mormon? And they're like, because you live in Colorado and someone told us that.
That's so funny.
You don't drink. And so they thought it's because you're a Mormon.
Do you know what's funny? I didn't get that extreme, but when I do have a drink now and again, because I will in some social aspects, I'm against drinking. I just grew up playing a lot of competitive sports, so I just never had time to drink. I was playing ice hockey, you know, 3 days a week and 2 games on the weekend, and I'm constantly training. So I didn't have time to go out and like drink on the weekends because I had to train and get ready for tomorrow's game. That's it. There's no strange reason behind it, but I used to be made to feel like I was weird because I didn't want to go and drink as well. And when I did have a drink, to your point, like Chris's pipe, people, Chris is drinking. Oh my God. I'm like,
you go off the wagon.
Yeah, what's wrong? Literally, what's wrong, Chris? Is everything okay? I'm just having a drink, guys. It's all good. But yeah, that's a very interesting one. And my wife's black, and the only reason I say that is that in her workplace environment, there are certain things that, or you know, microaggressions or activities that she feels like, oh, I have to go and do that because otherwise I'm going to be seen to that person. Even more pressure being black, where most of her entire team's white, that I need to go along with these things. And it's like energy that's just taken from her. She's like, oh, Chris. She's even come home and said, there's this thing going on with it, like, you know, and I gotta go. I've got to go. That's the language. I've got to go. I'm like, and she's like, oh. I'm like, really? Like that's crazy that you have to feel that way, that you need to go and show face in order to get ahead in the business.
No, for sure. And that, I think we're seeing a ton of that right now with return to work. Like people are working remotely, and for a lot of individuals who might be in minoritized or marginalized groups, they don't want to go back because of that. Like, oh my God, it's so much work. Like, yes, it's fun to be around other people. I think, like, I'm pretty introverted, so I actually don't find it that fun. But in theory, you get energy from other people. But if you also have like, it's energizing, and it's just so much effort because I have to worry about everything I do. If I don't go to lunch, people are going to think I'm
unsociable,
angry, or whatever stereotype they might place in, or I'm not, as committed. Like you said, people thought of you're not committed because you're not drinking. Maybe you're more committed because you want to.
Yeah, I'm working.
I know.
That's the crazy thing.
Enough to know you probably left that event and went home and worked.
Yeah,
so,
that's what's crazy. I was like, why you all in Vegas? I'm working.
Yes.
Like, I'm doing things here. I don't want to be part of that. Yes, it's really interesting. And like on the flip side of that, though, I've got friends that have felt that even though they don't want to go back, they have to go back because if they don't go back, they will miss out on those promotions.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to be one of the employees that work full-time remote, for example, they're going to lose that next promotion. They're not going to have to FaceTime with that CEO and therefore be overlooked for a project. So now they're traveling an hour and a half each way every day just to make sure they don't miss out on an opportunity. So you got that side too. I think
you're going to see that. And I think that over time, that's my prediction, is that's going to go away, because I don't think those companies are going to be able to attract and retain the best talent. And so they're going to end up losing
We're already seeing
very best employees.
Yeah, they're already losing them as we speak. It's already happening. Yeah.
I bet your buddy's leaving right now.
Yeah, many of them. That's the thing, is many of my friends who I never thought, and they also never thought they'd leave businesses during the last few, like many people, we're seeing sort of the great re-engagement, the great resignation, whatever you want to call it. At this point, there's many versions of it. We're seeing it. People are taking less money. They're like, you know what? I'll take a pay cut because I want to, because I want to see my kids, or I want to, be able to work for a company that trusts me and they don't need to see me to know that I'm working as well. So then, provide some practical strategies then. So what are some practical strategies to become an inclusifier? Or some of the things we can do as leaders?
Well, so of course, it kind of depends on what your natural strengths are. So that's the way the book is set up, is like there's a quiz and you can figure out what type of leader you might be, and there's different strategies. But, I think one of the biggest lessons is to take, like, I'm going to say, be a podcaster. Like, approach leadership like you're really trying to learn from everyone on your team. And so that means like you're asking really good questions, you're listening. If someone's not contributing, it's kind of your job to get them to speak up and share their views. And, there's tools to do this now in a virtual setting. You can use the chat feature and say, I want to hear what you have to say. Or you can create an environment where each person contributes if you don't have a team where everyone tends to talk. If you're doing Zoom or, virtual meetings, tape it and then watch it back and look at like who is speaking, who's not speaking, and consider like it's your job to hear from everyone in that room, or you just wasted time and money. And so figure out a way to make it happen. Are there people on your team who are speaking over others? Are like, I know my experience of, I would say something in a meeting and no one would respond. And then you're like, oh my God, like, did they not hear me? Or was that just idiotic? Is my tiny voice too small? Like, what the heck? And then someone else would say that same idea later and everyone would just be like, oh, that's great.
The worst.
It is the worst. And I realized, or I found, if that's not me, that's like a common phenomenon that women experience and women of color experience and people of color experience. So if you see it, here's the beauty. When you see it, you can never unsee it. And so you can use that information to start changing the way you run meetings and get people to contribute so that everyone feels engaged and you're actually getting the most out of everyone's time, because otherwise that's just a waste of time for that person to sit there like feeling bad in a meeting for an hour.
We've all been in those meetings like, why am I here?
Yes. I think meetings are like the death of employee morale. Just like sitting in meetings where someone's talking at you, it's like, it's not helpful. Like meetings have to be engaging, and that means people need to be contributing.
Yeah, we have to, and even now with the sort of virtual environment, hybrid, we have to be even more intentional about it. It's not going to happen organically. So and also not everyone wants to give their feedback in the public forum, right? They may want to message you after and give you their feedback, right? As well. Or
I really encourage leaders to do this like proactively. So before meetings, you send out the questions like, this is what we're going to be covering. Here's the topics. If you have thoughts, share them. And so going into the meeting, this requires more work for the leaders, but this is your job. So they can look at what's the pulse of the team. What are people saying? And if everyone agrees on a topic, start with that. And then say, we all agreed. So we don't need everyone to hash out the ideas of why you all agree. But instead, I want to spend time focusing on why you don't agree. like give me some devil's advocate in here, or tell me, what are we going to hear up the stream of why this is a terrible idea, or what are the risks? Because if everyone agrees, there's an issue, right? It could be, it's just an easy answer, but more likely it's like people aren't thinking deeply about it to see the holes in the idea. And so you can start with that, like, where's the disagreement? And then when you go into the next item where there probably is disagreement, then people are kind of set up to feel like, oh, it's okay to disagree. This is what we're supposed to be doing here. That's why we're in a face-to-face or, virtual face-to-face environment, is to give differing opinions and really like, look at all the angles of an idea, because even if that's what you choose, you've already strengthened your position by just thinking through it a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that also creates that culture of psychological safety, right? Where we're spending our time talking about everyone's diverse perspectives and insights. Yes, we may not always agree on it, but that's where let's spend our time. Why are we going to spend our entire time talking about things we all agree on?
I know. I call it vehement agreement. When people are like, I think we should do it because
this. Great. Yeah. Like, let's all celebrate ourselves. Yeah. No, I love that idea. And it's not, you're right. Most 80% of the time is typically, probably more than that, spent on the things we all agree with. And then we kind of touch upon these areas where everyone's a bit more sensitive about disagreements, right? Whereas really where the magic and the movement happen is having those more open dialogues and challenging each other, etc. Because and that's another great reason about why you send the information before and after, like you're describing, because those people that necessarily may not want to do that in an open forum will do that via an email, for example, or may want me to feel more comfortable. So you give them the opportunity to provide their honest, open feedback, because they may not want to do it when there's like 10 other people that are going to, we all disagree with you as well. I know how that feels as well. So it's very daunting sometimes to do that.
Yeah, there's some other hidden bonuses too from doing it. Like if someone can't attend at the last minute because they have, something else comes up, like a lot of employees have families.
Again, a family commitment, right? I'm doing like Natasha, she said to me during the middle of the pandemic, oh, I can't attend this leadership meeting because I've got to give Robin lunch. I was like, that's crazy. You shouldn't have to choose between giving Robin lunch and because she felt the fear of missing out was there. Oh, I'm going to miss out on information that I need to be involved in. That's a perfect example, right? Of like, if they took the notes, they shared the information that way, she'd be like, oh, cool, I'll catch you later.
Yeah.
Let me focus on feeding my daughter lunch rather than stressing out about work as well. So, yeah.
So true. And then you can also tape the meeting, post it, everything is easily transcribable. Like, thanks to the glory of technology, there's no need that everyone has to be sitting there observing. Like you can read it, get the audio, you can change the audio back into written form. Like it's all of this is so doable.
Exactly.
It's just that we're still clutching on to like, this is the way we always did it. We made people sit here and I watched them. And that's just it's over. It's not coming back.
No. What are some of the other strategies that came out of the book that really stood out to you?
Yeah. I think one that like I really appreciate is empowering people to build your network, to have a more diverse network. I think that's easy when we look at our organizations and there's a lack of diversity. So this is more diversity, the other was more inclusion. To say like, well, it's a pipeline problem. I don't know anyone. Like, what could I do? I put the job ad out there, no one applied, and recognize that you put the job ad out there and you also contacted your friends in your network on LinkedIn, and our networks look a lot like us. And so we are recruiting people who are similar to ourselves implicitly.
Because it's easier, right?
And it's easy, yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, like, you can do a better job by being the person who proactively goes out there and tries to form connections, maybe with people who are different. Like I go to employee resource group meetings or in trade associations. Like there are, I might be involved in like WIN, the Women's Network, and Hispanic and Latino Thrive. And I'm not a part of the LGBTQ plus group, but I can go there and say, I just want to get to know people. I'm recruiting. I want to know the top talent. There may be people here I don't know. Or I can go to Black At and say, there's people in this group who I really want to expand my network. And so I can recruit them for openings that we have coming up. And I'll say in my experience, like this has worked really well. I think at first some people are like, what are you doing here? But then I explain and then they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. But I will say that I've told this advice to men and they've gone to the women's network and they're like, okay. The women are like, hey, sir, why are you here? And they're like, I'm looking for talent. And the women are like, what? And so I will give a little asterisk to say, maybe bring a wingman or like another person. So you have like a little bit of safety there and you can better explain before getting flustered why you're there.
Maybe you can just ask, right? As well.
Yeah, or just,
yeah. That's a tough one, just dropping in a women's network.
Yeah.
As a white male man, hey everyone,
I'm looking for some talent.
I can imagine that being it's either going to go really, really well or going to be a disaster.
I think it usually goes well if people understand why you're there.
The why.
This is something I learned from Zayo's CEO, who had done a really good job increasing the gender diversity of his board. And I'm like, how did you do that? And he's like, well, everyone on the board said like, no women are applying, or, headhunters aren't giving us a diverse slate. And so he just went out and tried to meet women in board ready organizations and on other boards, and knowing like, okay, this is why he's doing it, it helps. But I think asking works too. Like, and then for all of the people who are involved in these networks, also you need to have events where you bring in allies for just the same reason. It goes both ways.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah. People always ask me that when we spoke about before about strategies of growing our personal network, and part of that and people are afraid of rejection, so they don't ever connect, or they don't reach out to people that don't look, or agree with them, look like them or agree with them. Whereas I found actually some of the most rich conversations and most meaningful conversations have come through doing exactly that. And yes, they may not reply, and yes, you might have to feel like people are so afraid of being rejected or not agreeing, and I'm like, that's the whole point, though. That's where the magic is, right? And you get such a broader view of everything. I've had people on the show podcasts which I completely disagree with, like their whole focus and strategy towards HR and the future of work, etc. And I'm like, but I want to hear it and I want to share it with as many people as possible. I had a guy that came on the show not too long ago who was kind of went viral in the UK for saying that HR doesn't need to exist anymore. Like the whole function, right, doesn't need to exist, and it went viral. And people, obviously, HR leaders are pretty upset about it, as you can imagine. So I went to his office in London. They're a $1 billion energy company, and I was like, and he has no HR department, and he's built this $1 billion company, and I was like, why did you say that? We just sat down, and I got the camera, brought the whole team along, and it was really cool. And he was like, I'm not saying not valuable. He's just saying that I think HR should live with every leader in the organization and not, but so it was kind of like, it's like, oh, okay. Again, so you're not saying that HR doesn't have a value. He's like, no, I'm saying that in most companies, everyone just uses HR as like, go to HR for that, as opposed to providing our leaders with the tools that they need to actually lead and have some of those conversations, as opposed to go, oh, that's an HR issue. No, that's a leadership issue. As a manager, you should be able to have that conversation.
Do you tell people this on your podcast when you're like, I completely disagree with you?
When I feel strong enough about it, yes. Yeah. Very rarely do I have those, like very rarely is I've ever got to that stage where I have to say that, to be honest. Yeah. So, but again, like
where you really disagree with someone and like you're reading Forbes articles, do you invite them on?
No, if I'm being honest. I should probably do more of that.
Maybe you can have like on Fridays, like brawls, like full on. You said you played ice hockey, so
Yeah. It's interesting because it's there, so it's mainly it's not more for me because I don't really care about how my brand's perceived. It's more for them because so they would only a lot of times I have done that. They only want to go on podcasts or shows that agree with their narrative. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Like they're like, why am I going to go onto your show to be promoted across, to hundreds of thousands of people for you to then say like, I disagree with you, right?
Yes.
So like, it's more from their perspective. It's like, you know, people only go on certain news shows or news. They only get people on that agree with their narrative.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Whereas in this case with Octopus Energy, which is the company, they knew. I literally reached out saying your articles upset a lot of the community. I want to come and hear it from you and what you're saying. He was like, great. And I was like, oh, great. So then we did it, you know, whereas that never really happens. Normally they're like, no.
Yeah, for sure.
The healthy
I feel
dialogue.
like it would be more fun to watch, at least the news, if we had like.
Oh no, no one would ever do it, would they? It would be great. It's one of the reasons why everyone loves watching sort of the presidential debates every year. This is the first time you hear them go back and forth in person, face to face, right? They're doing all their tours and they're saying what they're saying, but it's the first time you get to see two individuals in the room going back and forth, which is why people, like when people ask me about our CHRO roundtables that I do in person, so I bring like 30 chief people officers together I used to do that every single month before the pandemic. And the thing that I always say to everyone, which I love the most, is the disagreements. Because we don't record it, because we don't have cameras in the room and we don't have vendors or anyone, and they know that it's the sort of a safe space.
Yeah.
There's been so many heated debates amongst leaders from, you know, global brands, and, you know, very often they're not challenged as CHROs in their company. So now they're in a room with 29 others who actually in some kind don't agree with them. That's what
isn't that amazing?
Magic. Oh, it's so good. Like I love sitting there. Whenever I hear the debates kick off, I'm like, oh, in my head, I'm like, I wish I could share this, but I can't. Obviously, that's the whole point of that, creating that safe space. And a lot of this content is very sensitive, as you can imagine. But I'm like, oh, this is so valuable. If only if I could share this with our community as well. Yeah, unfortunately, especially with sort of the media, sort of the cancel culture, the sort of everyone's sort of treading on eggshells now about.
Yeah, no, I think that's true.
Yeah, like even with this show, when I'm getting guests on the show, like their PR and comms teams, there's so much scrutiny now about before getting leaders on the show and what you can and cannot say as well. So it's always interesting to navigate that. So what's been the main feedback from people that read the book? Like what's the main feedback of sort of what people have taken away from it? I would love to hear what you've heard from readers or listeners, because it's on Audible, right, as well. So both.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Audible's really good. People like to listen to it.
Is it your voice? Is it your voice?
Oh, it's not my voice. So I actually have a really weak voice in that, like, I'll lose my voice if I talked for 12 hours straight. I need to like warm up or something. But you know, I think that the strongest feedback that I've gotten, or most consistent, is that it's just really actionable. It's just like, you know, each chapter is like, here's 3 things to do. Here's 3 things to do, rather than like, yes, diversity is so important, inclusion is so great. Like we know that, like we know the theory, we know the people believe in this for the most part, or if they don't, they're reading it because they don't believe in it, but it's not actionable. And I think we're at the point where people want to know, like, now what can I do? And things that I can do that are actually proven to make a difference, not just like, you know, go to unconscious bias training again, wondering how can it be unconscious at this point? Because we talk about it all the time, but instead, like, what's something I can do that's actually going to move the needle?
Yeah, talking about disagreements, that's one that I get a lot when I ask D&I leaders, does unconscious bias training work? There's always a disagreements on that topic. Some say yes, some say no. Some say that's always a fun one to throw into a conversation with a group of D&I leaders, or any leaders, to be honest, not just D&I as well. What's next for you?
It's a good question. So I think probably the most actionable thing is I'm trying to create solutions for building belonging in a more remote work environment. So recognizing, like, a lot of the recommendations in Inclusify and that we hear are just tougher today because, you know, not everyone's in the office. How do we build human connections so that people aren't just, you know, looking to leave to this other job is $5 more an hour, or requires fewer in-office days. But like, if people aren't embedded in their organization, like they don't feel connected, it's easy to leave. And that's what we're seeing with the Great Resignation, or whatever you want to call it. I can just go somewhere else. So how can companies still do that? And I think the solution is to use technology. And so finding ways, like I have some tools I've created to give feedback on inclusion that don't require like the awkward face-to-face conversation. It's like more anonymous ways of getting feedback. Tools to find, I think of it like the Find My Friends on your iPhone. Like, are there people in the office to have lunch with, to connect with? Or even if you're not in the office, are there people who work for my company who are nearby who I can collaborate with away from the office?
That'd be really cool. It's like
yeah.
if you like live in London and you had like a Find My Colleague feature on an app where you could see who's about and like meet for lunch or something like that. That'd be really cool.
I know. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
You can. It's really not that hard. So just thinking about like, what are the things we're losing? And then how can we use technology and like to bring it back in a virtual environment?
Yeah, it's very exciting. And I'm going to put you on the spot now. You wasn't expecting this, but before this show, we was talking about the potential of a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm going to say right now, you should look like in front of all of our listeners right now, you need to launch a podcast.
I need to launch a podcast. Okay, I do.
Oh, we're going to make it happen.
I love learning from leaders and then also from scholars, of people doing the research. And I think we need more of that connection of people who are doing, professional research with people who are implementing it. And maybe not for an argument, but to like learn from both. Like, yeah, there's great research findings. And a lot of our research just isn't applicable. And we need the reality check from people doing the work of like, this is all fine and good, but how do you actually make it happen and learn from their expertise?
Yeah. And I think it's great with the book and all the stories. Everyone definitely grab a copy of it. The link's in the description below, but also hearing like an audio version where you speak to those leaders and they share would be really cool. And I think really, really, powerful for everyone.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Before I let you go, and I'm sure your voice will survive. I'm sure you'll be all right. Before I let you go, where I know,
training, right?
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, my voice always goes doing too many shows as well. My wife's happy to hear me be quiet for once, so she normally celebrates that. Where can people find you, connect with you, follow you? Where's the best place?
For sure. All my socials at Dr. Steph Johnson, DrStef Johnson. And I have a website at Dr. Steph Johnson at inclusifybook.com and inclusify.com.
And I'm assuming the book's available everywhere books are available.
Books are available everywhere. Anywhere you can buy a book, you can buy Inclusify.
Amazing. Well, look, thanks for joining me. I'm super jealous still of the fact that you're like living the dream right now and just walk outside the door and go to the beach while the rest of us are whatever we're doing as well. And enjoy the moment, enjoy the time. And I look forward to speaking again soon. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks so much. This was such a great chat. Enjoy the rest of your day.